Listening isn't just hearing words. It's the secret door that leads to real understanding. When I started to truly listen, my English started to grow, and so did my confidence. My name is Scarlet, and for a long time English felt like a locked door I couldn't open. I moved to the United States in my early 20s with a heart full of hope and a mind full of fear. I had big dreams of starting fresh, making friends, getting a good job, being part of something real. But I quickly found out that not knowing how to speak English well made everything feel far away and impossible. Even though I had studied it back home in school, that kind of English didn't help me much in the real world. I could write sentences and pass grammar tests, but when it came to speaking out loud, my voice would disappear. I still remember my first trip to the grocery store in a small town in Ohio. I had a short list in my hand: eggs, milk, bread, chicken. Simple, right? But the moment the cashier said, "How's it going today?" I froze. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum. I smiled weakly and just nodded. She looked at me funny, maybe a little confused, and I felt heat rising in my cheeks. I grabbed my bags and rushed out as fast as I could. The fear wasn't just about not knowing the words, it was the fear of looking stupid, of being judged, of not fitting in. So I stayed quiet. That silence became my habit. At my part-time job at a local bakery, I did the tasks that didn't require much talking. I would stack shelves, clean tables, and nod along when my coworkers made jokes I didn't understand. If someone asked me something simple like, "Could you hand me that?" I would just point or smile. I started to become invisible. I thought staying quiet would protect me from embarrassment, but instead it trapped me in a world where I couldn't connect with anyone. Every night, I would lie in bed replaying conversations I had avoided. The customer who asked for a recommendation, the coworker who tried to chat with me about the weekend, the woman at the gym who smiled and said hello. I'd think, I could have said something, I should have tried, but I never did, because inside I believed I wasn't good enough. I thought real English was something only native speakers could use confidently, and I was just someone trying to survive. I remember one day at work, my manager needed someone to show a new employee around. I wanted to raise my hand. I really did. I knew the tasks, I knew the schedule, but I didn't trust myself to explain things in English. What if I messed up? What if they laughed at me? So I looked down at the floor, and someone else volunteered. Afterward, I went into the walk-in freezer, shut the door behind me, and cried. Not because I was cold, but because I was tired. Tired of being scared of my own voice. Around that time, I started writing in a small notebook that I kept in my backpack. I didn't write in full English sentences, just little thoughts. I want to talk more. I want to feel brave. I want to make one friend. Those notes were like tiny promises I made to myself. I didn't know how or when, but I wanted to change. Then something happened. Something small, but it stuck with me. One rainy afternoon, I was sitting alone during my lunch break. I had my sandwich and a cup of coffee, and I was scrolling through my phone. I accidentally tapped on a YouTube video about learning English. The speaker was calm and clear, using short words, and they said something I'll never forget. Before you speak, you must learn to listen. Listening is where real learning begins. I paused the video. I replayed that line. I let it sink in. Listening is where real learning begins. That sentence opened a tiny window in my mind. I had always focused on speaking, thinking that's what I needed to master. But maybe I was going about it the wrong way. Maybe instead of trying to force myself to speak before I was ready, I could start by just listening. That didn't sound as scary. Listening didn't require me to be perfect. It didn't put me on the spot. And maybe, just maybe, it could help me build the confidence I needed. So that night, I searched for simple English listening materials. I found a podcast made for beginners with short, slow conversations about daily life. The first episode was about ordering coffee. I hit play. The woman said, "Hi, I'd like a medium coffee with cream and sugar, please." I repeated it out loud, slowly. Then again, and again. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't nervous. I was curious. That's when I started thinking, what if I turned listening into a habit? What if instead of staying stuck in silence, I began to fill my world with English sounds? What if my ears could become my teacher? I didn't have money for expensive classes, but I had a phone. I had headphones. I had time while commuting to work or cleaning my apartment. And I had a new goal. Not to speak perfectly, but to understand more and more every day. That little shift, thinking of listening as learning, was the spark I needed. And that's exactly where the next part of my journey begins. After that night with the podcast, the one where I heard someone order coffee in slow, simple English, something inside me shifted. I didn't wake up the next day magically fluent, of course, but I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. It was quiet, but strong. And this time, instead of focusing on what I couldn't say, I decided to focus on what I could hear. I made a promise to myself that morning. I'm going to train my ears first. I'll let English come in before I try to push it out. It was honestly a huge relief. I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to open my mouth and risk embarrassment. All I had to do was listen. Just listen. And so I started right where I was, with the few things I already used every day. My phone became my personal English coach. I opened up the podcast app and searched for more beginner-level English shows. I found one that shared simple conversations about everyday topics, going to the doctor, shopping for clothes, cooking dinner. These weren't fancy lessons. They were natural, slow, and full of the kinds of words I heard in my everyday life in America. That's what made it stick. At first, I only understood maybe 40% of what they said, but I didn't let that bother me. I would play one episode while making breakfast, brushing my teeth, and getting dressed for work. Then I'd listen again while walking to the bus stop. Sometimes I'd play the same episode 4 or 5 times in one day. The repetition helped. My ears started to recognize certain phrases. How much is this? Where can I find... Do you have any in size medium? These were real phrases people used, not textbook stuff. Soon I started picking up the rhythm of how people talked. It wasn't just the words. They used tone, pauses, and stress to express feelings. A simple, "Oh, really?" could mean surprise, boredom, or even sarcasm, depending on how it was said. I started to understand the music of English, not just the vocabulary. That was huge. I also discovered YouTube channels made for English learners like me. One of my favorites was hosted by a woman from the Midwest who spoke in a warm, slow, and clear voice. She used real-life settings, like a trip to the supermarket or a morning routine, to teach simple English sentences. She wasn't teaching grammar rules. She was just talking. That's what I needed. I didn't want lectures. I wanted to feel like someone was sitting across the table from me, just chatting over coffee. I created playlists of these videos and podcasts and kept them on my phone like they were treasure. I downloaded episodes so I could listen on the bus, during work breaks, or even while doing the laundry. At first, I kept the subtitles on when watching. I'd read along, then rewatch without subtitles to test how much I understood. I even started muting the audio sometimes and guessing what the speaker was saying just by reading lips and watching body language. That helped too, because in real life, people use their hands, faces, and eyes when they talk. But the biggest change came when I stopped forcing myself to understand every single word. I let myself feel the language instead. Instead of translating every sentence back to my native language in my head, I just let the sounds wash over me. It felt like tuning into a new frequency. At first it was static, but then slowly the station came in clearer and clearer. There was one weekend that made me realize how far I had come. I was cleaning my apartment with a podcast playing in the background. I wasn't even paying full attention, just vacuuming and wiping the counters. But then I laughed out loud at something the speaker said. It was a silly joke about mixing up salt and sugar while baking, and I had understood it. Not just the words, but the joke itself. That moment hit me like a wave. I realized I had stopped studying English and had started living in it. Around this time, I began to turn every moment of my day into an opportunity to listen. On the bus, I didn't scroll through social media anymore. I listened to American news stations or short documentaries. I followed English-speaking influencers on Instagram and paid attention to how they spoke in their stories. I watched American cooking videos on TikTok and copied how they described the steps. Even my Netflix account got a makeover. I changed my profile settings to English and turned on English subtitles only. I started rewatching shows I had already seen in my native language, but this time in English, so I already knew the story and could focus on the words. My ears were working overtime, but I didn't mind. I felt like a sponge, soaking up everything. And slowly, it began to change the way I thought. I stopped translating in my head. I started to think in English, just little thoughts at first. I need to get milk. That dress is cute. I'm tired. But those little thoughts built confidence because they were mine. They didn't come from a textbook. They came from real life. I also noticed a change in my memory. Before, I had to study new vocabulary with flashcards and lists. But now, I remembered words because I had heard them so many times. I knew what "take your time" meant, not because I looked it up in a dictionary, but because I had heard it in real conversations, between a mom and her child, between coworkers at the office, in TV shows, everywhere. Listening gave me context, and context made everything stick. Soon, I began testing myself. I would listen to short clips without subtitles and try to write down what I heard. At first, I got maybe half the words right. But after a few months of doing this, my accuracy improved. I even started predicting what people would say next in conversations. That made me feel powerful, like I was finally in tune with the flow of English. But I wasn't just listening to podcasts and videos anymore. I had started listening to people. In real life. At work, I paid close attention to how my coworkers greeted customers. I watched how they handled small talk. "Hey, how's it going?" "Not bad, just tired. Nice weather today, huh?" These small phrases were golden. They weren't fancy or complicated, but they were real. They were the building blocks of American conversation. I would stand near the front counter, pretending to organize something, while listening to how customers ordered coffee or asked for extra napkins. I watched how the barista responded with kindness and casual confidence. "Sure thing? You got it. No problem at all." These weren't lines from a textbook. They were real, friendly, and American. At the grocery store, I kept my earbuds out so I could listen to the people around me. I would watch how the cashier said, "Did you find everything okay?" and how the customers answered, Some said, "Yep, all good." Others joked about forgetting something. Some made small talk about the weather or their weekend plans. I listened to all of it, like a student in the world's biggest classroom. And slowly, something amazing happened. The fear that had once wrapped around my throat like a rope started to loosen. I found myself answering people more often. Just a few words at first. "Yeah, thanks." "You too." "I'm good." But even those tiny moments felt like victories. My listening had given me courage because I knew the words. I had heard them 100 times before. They weren't scary anymore. I kept a journal of all the new phrases I learned just by listening. Not grammar rules, just real-life phrases and expressions. Things like, "No worries, I'm just browsing." "It's been a long day. I'll take a rain check." "Fingers crossed." These little expressions made me feel like I belonged, like I was learning the real language. Not the one in books, but the one people actually use every day in the USA. I realized that listening wasn't just helping me understand English, it was helping me belong. I wasn't sitting in silence anymore. I was stepping into the rhythm of life around me. And the more I listened, the more I wanted to try speaking. Not perfectly, not to impress anyone, but just to connect. And that's exactly what I did next. Because one day, after months of listening and learning, something happened outside a Target store that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning. The sky was clear and the air was still cold from the night before, but the sunshine felt warm on my face. I had just left Target after picking up a few things: paper towels, frozen vegetables, and toothpaste. I was walking back to my car when a woman stopped me in the parking lot. She looked a little lost. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you know if there's a gas station nearby?" Something incredible happened in that moment. I didn't freeze. I didn't panic. I just answered, without thinking too hard. "Yeah," I said. "If you go out of the parking lot and take a right, there's a Shell station just 2 blocks down next to the bank." She smiled. "Thanks, you saved me." And I smiled back, a real smile. "No problem. Have a good one." I walked to my car, sat down in the driver's seat, and took a deep breath. I had just spoken English clearly and confidently with a stranger. It wasn't a big conversation. It wasn't perfect, but I had understood everything she said. And more importantly, I had responded without fear. That moment stayed with me for days. I kept replaying it in my mind, not because I was nervous, but because I was proud. That's when I realized all those months of listening to podcasts, videos, and stories had built something powerful inside me. But now, I was ready for the next step. I wanted to go beyond earbuds and screens. I wanted to practice listening to real people in real places. Not in a classroom, not in a lesson, but in the everyday world I lived in. So I made a new plan. Every day, I would put myself in situations where I could listen to people talk naturally. I didn't need to join a club or go to school for this. I just had to be present. I had to open my ears to the real, raw, beautiful noise of American life. The coffee shop became my first classroom. There was a cute little place downtown with big windows and cozy booths, and I started going there a few times a week. I'd order a small black coffee because it was cheap and sit near the front counter with my journal. I wasn't spying or being creepy. I just listened to the way customers ordered, to the way the baristas responded, to the way people greeted each other. Some conversations were short and simple. "Can I get a vanilla latte with oat milk?" "Sure, anything else?" "Nope, that's it. Thanks." Others were full of life. Friends meeting up after work. Couples arguing over what dessert to get. A guy nervously asking the barista for her number. It was real and messy and beautiful. And I wrote everything down. Not whole sentences, just little pieces. Words that were new to me. Phrases I wanted to try later. Things like, "What are you in the mood for? Do you want that for here or to go? Totally get it. Happens to me all the time. You look wiped. Long day?" These weren't phrases I had learned in school. They were the real English people use when they're relaxed and being themselves. And the more I heard them, the more I understood not just the language, but the culture too. I began to understand the rhythm of casual speech, the way Americans shorten words, blend sounds, use body language, and laugh mid-sentence. It was like learning a song. And once I knew the tune, I could start singing along. After the coffee shop, I moved on to other listening locations. My second favorite was the grocery store. Not just because I needed groceries, but because it was full of short, useful conversations. At the deli counter, I listened to how people asked for half a pound of turkey. In the produce aisle, I heard moms tell their kids to put that back, or "We're not getting that today." At checkout, I listened to how people talked to the cashier. They made small talk about the weather, joked about buying too much, or asked about store discounts. One day I was in the cereal aisle when I saw a dad with two little boys arguing over which cereal to get. The older one said, "We always get that one. Let's try something new." The dad laughed and said, "You know what? Fine. But if you don't like it, I'm not buying it again." That sentence stuck with me. I'm not buying it again. Simple, casual, but full of feeling. I repeated it under my breath. That's how I practiced, repeating real lines from real people in real moments. I also started going to the library, not just to borrow books, but to listen. The library was full of quiet conversations, people asking for help finding a book, students working on group projects, parents reading to their kids. The librarians were friendly and patient, and I paid attention to the way they explained things clearly. Once I overheard a woman ask the librarian, "Do you have any books on dealing with stress?" And the librarian said, "We sure do. Let me show you where those are." That phrase, "we sure do," was so American. I wrote it down and I used it later in conversation. It felt good to have these little tools in my back pocket. The gym was another great place to listen. I joined a small local fitness center, not because I loved working out, but because I wanted to be around native speakers. The locker room, the front desk, the group classes, they were all full of talk. People joked about being sore, shared smoothie recipes, or complained about how early it was. I started recognizing patterns. "What's up?" was used more than "hello." "I'm dying" didn't mean someone was actually in pain. It just meant the workout was hard. These small things added up. Even public transportation became part of my learning. On the bus, I'd listen to students talk about school, workers talk about their jobs, and seniors talk about their grandkids. I'd sit quietly with one earbud in, playing soft English audio, and the other ear free to listen to the world around me. My brain was always on, absorbing everything. There was one morning I'll never forget. I was waiting at the bus stop and two teenagers were standing nearby, arguing about a basketball game from the night before. One of them said, "Bro, he cooked y'all last night. You didn't see that three-pointer?" The other guy laughed. "Man, whatever. He got lucky. Next time we play, it's on." That was the first time I heard the slang phrase, "he cooked y'all," meaning someone played really well or dominated in the game. It was new to me, but the tone, the gestures, the excitement, it all made sense. That moment taught me something important. Listening doesn't mean you understand every word. It means you understand the meaning. the feeling, the message. That's what real listening is. As my listening skills grew, my confidence started to bloom. I began to interact more. Not full conversations, just little things. Smiling at the barista and saying, "Just the usual today?" Answering the cashier at the grocery store when they asked, "Do you need a bag?" Saying, "Have a good one," when I left the library. These moments were small, but to me, they were everything, because they showed me that I was part of the world now. I wasn't just watching from the outside, I was inside the conversation, even if only for a few seconds. I also started listening for emotion, the way someone's voice softened when they talked about their mom, the excitement when someone said they got a new puppy, the stress in a woman's voice when she said she was late for work. This helped me understand how to use English, not just what to say. Tone matters. Pace matters. Listening teaches you all of that. And through it all, I kept my journal. I filled pages and pages with notes, quotes, thoughts, and questions. Sometimes I'd go home and Google a phrase I had heard that day. What does "hit the spot" mean? Or, why do Americans say "bless you" after someone sneezes? I was always learning, always curious. One day, I was walking through the park and passed by a group of moms sitting on a bench, talking while their kids played nearby. One mom said, "You know, it's the little things, like a quiet cup of coffee before they wake up. That's my happy place." The others nodded and smiled, and I understood her completely. Not just the words, but the feeling. That sentence stayed with me. That's my happy place. I whispered it to myself, smiling. I knew exactly what she meant. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged in this language, in this country, in this life I was building. And then something happened that showed me just how far I had come. It was a regular day, and I was at work. A customer came in looking confused, and my coworker was busy in the back. I stepped forward and said, "Hi, can I help you find something?" The woman smiled and said she needed help finding a gift for her niece. We talked for 5 minutes, back and forth in English, and I wasn't nervous. I wasn't translating in my head. I was just there, listening and responding like it was the most natural thing in the world. All those hours of listening had brought me here, but I still had one more mountain to climb, the biggest one yet. It was time to open my mouth and start speaking for real. The first time I truly felt my voice come alive in English was one of those ordinary moments that turn extraordinary without warning. I was standing behind the counter at work, organizing a few items while humming a song playing softly from the radio. The store was quiet, just the usual low buzz of background chatter and the sound of carts rolling across the floor. A man walked up to the counter with a puzzled look on his face. "Excuse me," he said, "do you have any more of this in stock?" He held up a package of bath towels. My heart skipped for half a second, that old feeling of panic rising like it used to. But then something happened. Something different. I didn't freeze. I didn't look around for someone else to answer. I just said, "Let me check the back real quick. I'll be right back with you." I smiled, turned, and walked calmly toward the storage area. As I grabbed a few extra towels from the shelf, I felt a little jolt of pride. Not because I'd remembered the right words, but because I hadn't thought about the words at all. They had just come out naturally, like water flowing from a faucet. That's when I realized listening had done something magical. It had built a quiet confidence inside me, brick by brick, until I had a strong foundation to stand on. And now I was standing tall. It didn't happen overnight. Speaking without fear wasn't a sudden victory. It was a slow, Steady climb, but every step was made easier because I had trained my ears first. For months, I had listened to how Americans spoke, how their voices rose when they asked a question, how they paused between thoughts, how they used small words and expressions to connect. My ears had learned the music of English, and now my voice was ready to sing. I remember how I used to script conversations in my head before saying a single word. I'd think, okay, if she says this, then I'll say that. But life doesn't follow a script. People interrupt. They change the topic. They laugh halfway through a sentence. And I realized that no amount of memorization could prepare me for real-world conversations. But listening could. Because when you listen deeply and often, something amazing happens. Your brain starts to expect the language. It begins to recognize the structure of sentences, the flow of speech, the common patterns. And that's what gave me the power to speak without rehearsing. I wasn't thinking about grammar rules or vocabulary lists. I was remembering sounds, rhythm, and feelings I had already heard 100 times. I started to test myself in little ways. At the bakery where I got my morning coffee, I used to just point at the menu and smile. But now I'd say, "I'll take a small iced coffee with hazelnut syrup, please." The first time I did it, my hands were sweaty. But the barista smiled and replied, "You got it." I beamed. That simple, casual phrase made me feel like I was part of something, like I belonged. Soon I was speaking more during my work shifts. If a customer looked confused, I'd step forward and ask, "Can I help you find something?" If they asked a question I didn't understand right away, I'd calmly say, "Could you repeat that one more time?" That was a big one for me, learning how to ask for clarity without shame. Listening had taught me that even native speakers don't always catch everything the first time. People say, "What was that?" or "Say that again," all the time, so I gave myself permission to do the same. Listening also taught me the art of small talk, which is a huge part of American culture. At first, I thought small talk was pointless. Why talk about the weather? Why ask, "How's your day going?" when you don't expect a deep answer? But then I saw how it works. It's not about the words. It's about connection. Small talk is how Americans open the door to deeper conversations. It's a social bridge. And thanks to listening, I had heard those bridges being built every day in coffee shops, stores, buses, and sidewalks. I started trying it out myself. When a customer looked friendly, I'd say, "Busy day so far?" If someone mentioned the weather, I'd respond, "Yeah, it's finally warming up. Feels like spring's coming early." These weren't groundbreaking statements, but they were mine. And each time I used them, I felt stronger, more present, more like a person who could hold their own in any room. There was a moment I'll never forget. Maybe the most emotional one in my English journey. It was during a staff meeting at work. Our manager, Rachel, asked for volunteers to share ideas on how to improve the customer experience. Normally, I would shrink into my chair, hoping she wouldn't look my way. But this time, something inside me stirred. I had an idea, a real one. And instead of staying silent, I raised my hand. "I think maybe we could make the signs near the registers clearer," I said. "A lot of customers ask the same questions, and I've noticed they get confused. Maybe a simple pick any line sign would help." There was a pause. Rachel nodded. "That's a great point, Scarlet. Thanks for speaking up." And just like that, I had spoken in front of the whole team. My voice didn't crack. My words didn't stumble. I had shared a thought, and it had been heard and respected. That moment made me cry later that night. Not because I was sad, but because I had crossed a line I never thought I could. I had spoken, and I had owned it. The fear that had once wrapped itself around my throat like a chain was breaking. I wasn't scared of speaking anymore. Not because I was perfect. I still made mistakes. I still got nervous. But the difference now was that I didn't let those things stop me. I kept going because I had something stronger than fear. I had momentum. I had belief. And listening had given me that. Listening also helped me build relationships. I started talking more with my coworkers, not just about work, but about life. One afternoon, while we were restocking shelves, a girl named Jenna said, "Ugh, I'm so done with this week." I laughed and replied, "You and me both." She grinned and said, "Right? Let's get through this shift, then maybe hit up Taco Bell after." I nodded. Taco Bell sounds like a dream. It was just a silly moment, but it was real. It was connection. And I knew that without all my listening practice, I would have missed it, or stayed silent out of fear. One weekend, Jenna invited me to a small barbecue at her cousin's house. I was nervous to go. Everyone there would be American. I didn't want to be the quiet girl in the corner again, but I said yes. And that Saturday, I showed up with a store-bought pie and my best smile. At first, I stayed near the edge of conversations. I listened to people talk about sports, weekend plans, their dogs. I paid attention to tone, slang, laughter. Then someone turned to me and said, "Hey, Scarlet, where are you from?" I took a breath and answered, "Originally from Colombia, but I've been living here a few years." "Oh, cool. How do you like it?" "I love it more now that I'm not scared to talk to people," I said with a smile. They laughed, and one guy said, "You sound great. You've probably been speaking English your whole life." I almost cried, not because he was right, but because he had no idea how much work had gone into that moment. He didn't know about the nights I sat alone, whispering podcast phrases under my breath. He didn't know how many times I had wanted to give up. All he saw was someone who sounded like she belonged. And in that moment, I believed it too. Listening had done more than teach me English. It had taught me to be brave. It had given me tools to speak with kindness, clarity, and courage. I had learned not just to hear, but to respond. To be part of the world, not just a visitor in it. By now, speaking had become something I enjoyed. I looked forward to conversations. I volunteered more often. I smiled when people asked me for help or advice. I had even started mentoring a new coworker from Brazil, helping her with the same phrases I once struggled with. "Just listen," I told her one day. "Everywhere you go, keep your ears open. You don't have to speak right away. Just listen. Let the language sink into your bones." She looked at me, unsure, but I saw myself in her eyes, the same fear, the same hope. And that's when I realized it was time for me to do something I had never imagined. It was time for me to teach others how to learn English through listening, just like I had. I never thought I would become the kind of person others turned to for advice, especially not when it came to learning English. For so long, I was the one fumbling for words, ducking away from conversations, terrified that someone would notice my accent or the mistakes hiding in my sentences. But life has a way of flipping the script when you least expect it. One day, you're the one silently watching from the sidelines, and the next, someone is looking at you like you have the answers. And surprisingly, you do. It all started with one girl. Her name was Anna. She had just moved to our town from Brazil and got a part-time job at the same store where I worked. On her first day, she looked exactly like I had when I started. Quiet, shy, eyes scanning the floor, avoiding all the noise around her. During break, I found her sitting at the far end of the employee lounge, slowly stirring a cup of tea. I sat beside her and smiled. She looked up and gave a small smile back. I asked her how she was doing, and it took her a second to respond. "Nervous," she finally said. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Everyone speaks so fast." I nodded, my heart aching with familiarity. "I used to feel the same way," I told her. "Actually, I was terrified." Her eyes widened. "But you speak so good." I laughed gently. "That didn't happen overnight. It happened because I listened. I listened a lot." That conversation lit something inside me. It was the first time I realized that maybe, just maybe, my struggle could help someone else. That maybe everything I had been through wasn't just about me. So I offered to help her. I didn't call it tutoring. I didn't want it to feel like school. I just said, "If you ever want to practice or need help understanding someone at work, come talk to me. We'll figure it out together." From that day on, Anna and I started meeting during breaks, sometimes after work or on weekends when we both had free time. I didn't correct every mistake she made. I didn't hand her a textbook. Instead, I brought her into the real world of English, the same way I had learned. I showed her podcasts that I used to listen to, pointed out funny or useful phrases in movies, and encouraged her to sit in cafes or stores just to listen to people around her. "You don't have to understand everything," I said. "Just let the rhythm of the words wash over you. Get used to how it sounds. It's like music. The more you hear it, the more you start to feel the beat." At first, she was hesitant, but then one day she came to me all excited. "I understood a joke at the counter today," she said, her eyes glowing. "A customer said Monday should be illegal, and I knew what he meant. I laughed." We both giggled, and I felt a warm pride in my chest. Not because she was learning, but because she believed she could. Word got around quickly. Another coworker approached me quietly one day and said, "Scarlet, I heard you're helping Anna. Do you think you could help me too?" Then another. Soon, I found myself answering the same questions I used to have. How do I understand people who talk fast? What's the best way to learn new words? How can I stop being afraid to speak? And every time my answer started the same way. Listen first. That became my motto. Listen first. Listen everywhere. Listen when you're walking down the street. Listen when you're watching Netflix. Listen when people talk, even if they're not talking to you, because every word, every tone, every pause, that's where the real learning happens. I didn't need a classroom or a chalkboard to teach that. All I needed was my story. So I started writing it down. I began with a small blog, just a simple site where I shared my journey, how I learned English through listening, the podcasts that helped me, the little tricks I used when I was nervous, and the moments that made me feel proud. I called it Listen Like Me. I figured if my story could help even one more person, it was worth it. At first, only a few people visited, but then someone from a Facebook group for language learners found it and shared it. Suddenly, I started getting emails from people all over the country. A woman from Texas wrote, "Your story is my story. I cry reading your words because I thought I was the only one." A teenager from Chicago said, "I showed your blog to my mom. She finally understood how hard this is for me." I was overwhelmed, in a good way. I realized there was this huge silent community of people just like me. People who were scared to speak. People who felt stuck. People who were hungry to belong, to connect, to express themselves without fear. And now they had found someone who got it. That's when I decided to start a YouTube channel. I was terrified at first. Speaking into a camera, showing my face, sharing my voice with strangers online. It felt like walking into a room full of people and saying, "Look at me." But then I remembered how it all began. For me and for Anna. It began with listening. So I flipped the idea. Instead of making videos about me speaking, I made videos that taught others how to listen better. I recorded real conversations, explained slang, broke down phrases, and gave examples from everyday life. I talked about how to listen in the grocery store, how to catch words in a TV show, how to use music to train your ears. The goal was simple. Make English feel real. Not academic, not formal, just real. The comments started coming in fast. This is the first time someone explained it in a way I understand. I've been living in the US for 10 years and still struggle. Your voice gives me hope. You sound like a friend. Thank you for not making me feel dumb. I cried the first night I read those words because they reminded me of every tear I had shed, every moment I wanted to quit, and how listening had saved me. And now it was helping others too. I didn't stop there. I started hosting weekly listening challenges on my website. I'd post a clip from a show or podcast, then ask people to write what they heard and what it meant. We'd talk about the tricky parts. Fast speech, reduced sounds, idioms. People loved it. It became a community, not just a class. One of my favorite students is a man named Jose from Arizona. He's in his 50s and works long shifts at a warehouse. He told me he listens to my videos during his lunch breaks. He wrote, "Scarlet, I used to feel so dumb, but now I speak to my coworkers every day. I even made a joke last week. They laughed. It felt good. That's the magic. That's why I keep going." Teaching others through listening has become more than just a side project. It's a mission. I've spoken at local ESL programs, shared my techniques with teachers, and even started developing a mobile app for immigrant learners. It's all rooted in the same belief. English doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to listen and keep listening. The best part? I've watched people bloom. I've seen Anna go from whispering at work to leading team meetings with confidence. I've watched online followers share their first recorded sentences, shaky and proud, like baby birds learning to fly. I've had strangers message me and say, "I spoke to my neighbor today for the first time in years." And it all started with listening. Sometimes I sit back and think about that scared girl I used to be, the one who hid behind shelves, avoiding conversation, terrified of saying the wrong thing. She had no idea she'd grow into a woman helping thousands find their voice. But here I am, and I know, deep down, it was all worth it. Because now, every time I see someone struggling, I don't feel helpless. I see opportunity. I see the beginning of something powerful, and I say the same words every time. Listen. Just start there. Listen like your future depends on it, because it does. And when I see their eyes light up, I know what's coming next. They'll listen. They'll learn. And one day, they'll speak without fear, just like I did.